Welcome to History of the Popes, the podcast that delves into the lives and legacies of those extraordinary figures who have shaped the soul of the Catholic Church across 2 millennia. In each episode, we explore not just the events of their pontificates, but the deeper currents of faith, culture, and human striving that defined their eras. Today we turn our attention to one of the earliest shepherds of Rome, Pope Alexander I, the 6th bishop of that ancient see whose brief tenure in the shadowed dawn of the 2nd century whispers to us across the centuries about the quiet heroism of the early church. To speak of Alexander I is to enter a world where history and legend entwine like vines around an ancient olive tree, indistinguishable at times, yet together bearing fruit that nourishes the spirit. We know so little of him in the stark terms of dates and decrees, and that very paucity invites us to reflect on what it means to lead a fledgling community in the face of empire and oblivion. Born, we presume, in the late 1st century, perhaps in Rome itself or somewhere in the vast mosaic of the Roman world, Alexander emerges from the mists not as a conqueror or a canonist, but as a successor in a line of apostles' heirs. The ancient catalogues, those meticulous lists compiled by the likes of Irenaeus and Eusebius, place his episcopate sometime between 108 and 119, following the gentle St. Evaristus and preceding the steadfast Sixtus I. 8 to 10 years by most reckonings, a span that feels both fleeting and eternal when measured against the tempests of persecution that swirled around the Christian faithful. Imagine, if you will, the Rome of Trajan's day, that sprawling metropolis of marble forums and teeming insulae, where the air hummed with the chants of Vestal virgins and the clamour of legionaries returning from Dacian wars. The emperor, a man of stoic rectitude and pragmatic cruelty, had only recently codified the empire's stance toward these peculiar sectarians called Christians. Under his predecessor, Domitian, whispers of martyrdom had echoed through the catacombs. Now Trajan's correspondence with Pliny the Younger in far-off Bithynia laid bare the policy. No active hunts, but punishment for those who persisted in their superstition when brought before the praetor. It was a tolerance laced with menace, a velvet glove over an iron fist. In this precarious equilibrium, Alexander I took up the mantle of Peter, guiding a flock numbering perhaps a few thousand souls scattered across the eternal city, house churches in the Subura, clandestine gatherings on the Aventine, where the aroma of baking bread mingled with the incense of illegal liturgies. What do we truly know of his deeds? The sources are slender, like parchment fragments unearthed from monastic scriptoria. The Liber Pontificalis, that venerable 8th century compendium of papal law, attributes to him innovations that speak profoundly to the Church's emerging sacramental imagination. It claims he ordained the mingling of water with the sacramental wine during the Eucharist, a practice, we are told, to evoke the blood and water flowing from Christ's side on Calvary. Was this his doing? Historians demur. The custom likely predates him, rooted in the Jewish blessings of the temple or the practicalities of ancient liturgies. Yet the tradition clings, a testament to how early Christians sought to embody the mystery of the Incarnation in every gesture, every drop of chalice. More evocatively still, the same text credits Alexander with blessing homes against the powers of darkness, water mixed with salt, sprinkled in the sign of the cross, to ward off demons and consecrate domestic hearths as outposts of the kingdom. Here, in this simple rite, we glimpse the Church's genius for enculturating faith, salt, that preservative of flesh and symbol of covenant, from the days of Lot's wife. Water, the sacrament of baptism and font of renewal. In an age when the household gods of Rome still held sway, Alexander's blessing reframed the pagan domus as a Christian oikos, a space where the divine erupted into the mundane. But let us pause here, for such attributions carry the patina of later piety. The Liber Pontificalis, for all its charm, was no chronicle, but a hagiographic tapestry, woven centuries after the fact to edify and exhort. Eusebius, our nearest contemporary witness in the 4th century, mentions Alexander only in passing, as a link in the chain from Peter to his own embattled era. No bulls, no synods, no grand controversies mark his record, unlike the theological tempests that would soon engulf his successors. This silence is, in itself, eloquent. In the early 2nd century, the Bishop of Rome was no monarch enthroned in splendor, but a presbyter among presbyters, his authority moral and fraternal, rather than juridical. The Church was a diaspora of communities, bound by epistolary threads, letters from Ignatius of Antioch en route to his martyrdom, or the shadowy figure of Polycarp bridging east and west. Alexander's Rome stood as a beacon, yet one lit by the flicker of hidden lamps, not the blaze of Lateran torches. Tradition, that great river of collective memory, fills the gaps with stories that, if not historical in the modern sense, reveal the soul of the Church. Some accounts speak of martyrdom under Trajan, or his successor Hadrian, the blade of the executioner, the roar of the Colosseum, the faithful gathering relics from blood-soaked sand. The Roman martyrology, in its solemn cadence, pairs him with Eventius and Theodulus, priests of his putative circle, whose feast we keep on May the 3rd. They were said to have been buried along the Via Nomentana at the 7th milestone, in a catacomb that became a pilgrimage trail for generations. Yet doubt lingers, the timelines tangle, and scholars like those of the Bollandists caution that this Alexander may be another of the name, one among many confessors in a city awash with Alexanders, Greek merchants, freedmen, philosophers. Martyrdom or natural death? The uncertainty mirrors the early Church itself, a communion of saints half-veiled in glory, their witness proclaimed not by archives, but by the living liturgy. And then there are the legends, those luminous parables, that the medieval mind cherished as truth's deeper echo. In the apocryphal Acts of Saints Alexander, Eventius and Theodulus, texts redolent of Byzantine embellishment, we find the Pope languishing in the Mamertine prison, that dank vault beneath the Capitoline where Peter and Paul had once been held. There, amidst chains and despair, he encounters Hermes, prefect of Rome under Hadrian, a man of power and skepticism. Through prayer and miracle, visions perhaps, or the sudden healing of a withered limb, Alexander converts Hermes, his wife, and a household of 1,500 souls. Even Quirinus, the jailer, and his daughter Balbina fall under the spell of grace. The latter, tradition says, receives her sight restored and lays a golden ring at the Pope's feet as votive thanks. It's a tale straight from the hagiographer's quill, echoing the Acts of the Apostles with its cascade of baptisms and the subversion of empire. Historically improbable, without question, but spiritually it captures the subversive power of the early papacy, not in swords or edicts, but in the quiet alchemy of witness, turning jailers into guardians of the faith. To understand Alexander I, we must widen our gaze to the horizon of his time. The 2nd century was the Church's adolescence, a period of consolidation amid peril. Gnostic sirens sang of secret knowings. Marcion's scissors snipped the Old Testament from the New, while Judaism reeled from the Bar Kokhba revolt of 132 to 135, severing ties that once bound synagogue and ecclesia. In Rome, the community was polyglot. Jews from the diaspora, Greeks from the ports, Latins from the hills, all forging a new tongue of faith. Alexander's predecessors, Clement with his letter to Corinth, Trajan's contemporary Ignatius, whose 7 epistles burn with Eucharistic fire, had laid the foundations. Now under Alexander, the Church learned resilience, not through doctrine alone, but through praxis, the kiss of peace in catacomb masses, the agape meals that defied social strata, the alms that mirrored Christ's care for the widow's mite. Consider too the cultural ferment. Rome, that devouring cosmopolis, absorbed gods like Egypt's Isis or Mithras from the legions. Yet Christianity offered something audaciously singular, a crucified God who rose, demanding not rituals of propitiation, but a transformation of the heart. Alexander I embodied this in his putative blessings, the saltwater aspersion as exorcism, a domestic echo of Jordan's waters. In an era when Pliny could puzzle over Christians' depraved and extravagant superstition, refusing to curse Christ even under torture, the Pope's role was pastoral above all, to confirm the doubtful, strengthen the weak-kneed, and remind the flock that their true citizenship was in heaven. No wonder the traditions cluster around rites of purification. They were bulwarks against a world that saw the faith as contagion. Yet for all the haze, Alexander's legacy endures in the sinews of the Church. He is invoked in the litanies of saints, his name a litany bead in the rosary of history. Relics attributed to him, fragments of bone, say the Freising catalogues, were translated to Bavaria in 834, finding rest in the Abbey of Freising, where they became touchstones for medieval devotion. He is remembered as a faithful brother in the apostolic lineage, one who handed on the deposit of faith intact amid the lions' dens of conformity. As we conclude this meditation on Pope Alexander I, let us ponder what he teaches us in our own fractious age. In a time of algorithms and ideologies, where faith is often reduced to bullet points or battle cries, his shadowy pontificate reminds us that the Church's strength lies in fidelity to the small, the unseen, the mixing of water in the wine, the blessing of the threshold against night's shadows. He was no innovator in the manner of later Gregories or Innocents, but a steward, preserving the flame against the winds of Nicaea's precursors. In him, we see the early papacy not as power's apex, but as humility and service, where the vicar of Christ mirrors the servant who washed feet in an upper room. If you enjoyed this study of the papacy, check out our other episodes, and we'll see you next time on History of the Popes. Until then, keep exploring the past to understand the present.